The first alarm went off at 07:14, which was 11 minutes after I'd set my tea down on the conduit housing and told Pip to stay. She was staying. That was the problem. She'd found a warm patch of deck plating near the coolant return line and folded herself into it the way she always did on cold mornings. Nose tucked, chin flat, both eyes still tracking me as I worked. The station's motion sensing array, which had been calibrated for veteran biology and the 6 other species with docking rights on Cower 7, had read her lying down posture as something else entirely. The low crouch, the fixed gaze, the absolute stillness. It had flagged her as a Class 4 ambush predator, preparing to strike. I heard the alert tone, looked up, saw the red pulse cycling on the nearest wall panel, and looked back at Pip. She twitched one ear at the sound, went back to watching me. I keyed my maintenance band and logged it as a false positive. Environmental sensor misread, I typed. Earth dog, resting. The system acknowledged. The alarm kept going. I finished tightening the conduit bracket, drank half my tea, and waited. The veteran security architecture on a mid-tier transit hub like Core 7 runs in tiers. I know this because I've been working orbital stations for 9 years, and I've read the contractor safety brief 4 times. Tier 1 is the automated sensor net, what Pip had just tripped. Tier 2 is a manual override request routed to a duty officer. Tier 3 is a physical response team. The duty officer, a young veteran named Orvith Soon with pale ridge scaling and the harried look of someone who had not yet had his own morning meal, arrived at the service bay door at 07:19. He looked at Pip. He looked at his handheld. He looked at Pip again. "This is the threat signature," he said, holding out the screen. I leaned over. The station AI had drawn a targeting overlay around her and labeled it Unknown Apex, Stock Posture, Engage Recommended. "She's a Border Collie," I said. "I don't have that in the manifest. She's mine. She's been cleared through customs at 6 stations on this route." He checked something on the handheld, then something else. Pip yawned, the full jaw-stretching kind, with a small sound at the end of it, and put her chin back down. Orvith Suin filed a Tier 2 escalation report, which, I will admit, I had expected. Tier 2 on Car 7 routes to the station security coordinator, and the security coordinator's job is to treat every unresolved Tier 2 as a possible Tier 3. That's policy. It's not personal. Pip had gone back to sleep by the time the response team arrived. There were 4 of them, full armor, which on Cower 7 is the brushed bronze composite favored by the Veteran Defense Authority, articulated at the joints, with a sealed faceplate that reduces their already narrow field of vision to a horizontal slit. They moved into the service bay in a staggered line, which is good tactics against most things. They brought a long pole disruptor and what I recognized as a neural containment net, folded in a launch frame on the shoulder of the rearmost officer. Pip opened both eyes. She looked at them the way she looks at everything that enters a space she's decided belongs to her. Calm, systematic, filing it all away. Her head came up. She tracked the lead officer left to right to left, then back to center. The lead officer stopped walking. I don't know what that particular flavor of attention looks like to a veteran. I know what it looks like to me. I've had it directed at me often enough. It's not aggression. It's not threat. It's assessment. It's the same look she gives a gate latch she hasn't opened yet, or a flock of the neighbor's chickens back home, or a training field she's about to work. It's a working dog reading the problem. The lead officer took one step back. "She's not going to do anything," I said, from where I was crouched next to the conduit panel. "She's just looking at you." Nobody moved for about 6 seconds. Then Pip made a small noise, not a growl, not a bark, just the low conversational murmur she makes when she's bored and would like something to happen, put her head back down on her paws, and closed her eyes again. The lead officer filed a Tier 4 escalation. Tier 4 on Cower 7 is a biochemical assessment team. They arrived with atmospheric sampling drones and a portable scanner array and spent 22 minutes taking readings from various points around the service bay. Pip ignored them entirely. She'd found a more comfortable position, rolled slightly onto her side so the coolant line warmth hit her spine, and was breathing with the slow regularity of something that has no concerns whatsoever about its immediate surroundings. The biochemical team lead pulled me aside and told me in low, careful language that the atmospheric readings were, quote, anomalous. I asked him to specify. He said the local air composition registered trace markers associated with the pheromonal output of Earth-class apex predators. I looked at him. She's a dog, I said. Yes, he said. We understand that. Dogs are apex predators, I said. He was quiet for a moment. We understand that now, he said. He filed a Tier 5. Tier 5 is Station Command Notification. The station commander of Car 7 was a senior veteran administrator named Keth Droon, a heavy-set, ridge-dark individual who had, by all accounts, managed the station through a docking bay decompression event, 2 interspecies customs disputes, and a fuel leak that had taken out power to 3 decks. He arrived at the service bay at 0811 with the duty officer, the response team lead, the biochemical assessor, and 2 additional staff whose roles I was never able to determine. He looked at Pip for a long time. Pip was asleep, genuinely, fully asleep, one ear twitching occasionally at the ambient sound of the station's ventilation cycle, legs loose, breathing audible. This is the subject, Keth Droon said. Yes, said Orvith Suin. It has been sleeping for how long? 41 minutes, sir. The commander looked at his staff. He looked at the response team's neural containment net, still folded in its launch frame, and now thoroughly unnecessary. He looked at me. You are the owner, he said. I'm her person, I said. I wouldn't say I own her, exactly. He absorbed this. Your animal, he said, has triggered 5 escalating security tiers on this station. She's done it on 4 other stations, I said. Nathran Hub logs her as a Class 2 atmospheric emitter. Thresh Station calls her an unclassified biological event. Vethris Doc 7 has her in the system as a temporary observation case, ongoing. Keth Droon turned to look at his duty officer. The duty officer was studying the floor. She's a working dog, I said. She just needs something to do. If you've got a problem she can help with, she'll work it. Otherwise she'll find a warm spot and sleep. The commander considered this for a moment, that stretched longer than was entirely comfortable. Then he filed a Tier 6, which on Cower 7 is a request for a specialist threat assessment from the Veteran Defense Authority's Regional Biological Consultancy. I ate my lunch. The consultants arrived in 3 hours and confirmed, after extensive deliberation, that Pip was a domestic earth canid of the herding subspecies and posed no immediate tactical threat to the station or its personnel. They also noted, in a supplementary observation buried in paragraph 9 of their report, that her resting cortisol levels were lower than those of any organism they had assessed in the previous 11 years of consultancy work. They described this as physiologically notable. I thought about explaining that Border Collies sleep like this when they're comfortable, and there's nothing to herd. I decided against it. Tier 6 was logged as inconclusive. Tier 7 is not in the contractor safety brief. I found out about it the way you find out about most things on an alien station, by being in the room when it happened. Keth Droon came back at 1340. He came alone this time, no staff, and he didn't look like a man who was confident in what he was about to do. He stood in the service bay doorway for a moment, then he said something into his comm. What came through the door 30 seconds later was the Vethran threat hound. I'd heard of them. Every contractor who works the Vethran routes hears about them eventually, some from the briefing materials, most from other contractors over a meal somewhere, in the tone people use for things they're glad they haven't personally encountered. They're not large the way you'd expect something called a threat hound to be large. They're low and wide, with 4 articulated forward limbs, and a secondary sensory crest that runs the length of their spine and picks up biological threat signals, the way a satellite dish picks up transmissions. They're used in high-security environments because nothing that means harm can enter a room without the threat hound knowing about it approximately 4 seconds before anything else in the room does. The one that walked into Service Bay 14 was fully mature, crest fully raised, the neutral carry posture of an animal that is permanently operational. It had been deployed on Cower 7 for 6 years. According to the duty officer, who told me this later with an expression I can only describe as reverence, It had never sat down on duty. Not once. In 6 years. It came through the door and stopped. Pip opened her eyes. They looked at each other. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I've thought about it a lot since. The threat hound's crest, which had been fully raised, did not lower. It shifted. The way a dog's ears shift when it stops being alert and starts being interested. It took 2 steps toward Pip. It dropped its nose to about 6 inches from her head and held still. Pip looked at it, the calm, systematic look, filing it away. Then she put her chin back on her paws. The threat hound sat down beside her. Not a retreat, not a submission posture. I've seen enough of those to know the difference. It sat the way a senior animal sits when it has confirmed that whatever is sharing its space belongs there. The crest settled into what I later learned was the lowest carry posture it had ever displayed on active duty. Keth Druin had gone very still in the doorway. We stayed that way for a while, the commander in the door, me against the conduit housing with my maintenance kit, the 2 animals on the warm patch of deck plating. The station's ventilation cycled. Somewhere in the corridor outside, a cargo loader beeped twice and went quiet. "What is she doing?" the commander said, finally. "Resting," I said. "She worked a full shift yesterday. This is what she does after a full shift." He watched them for a moment longer. "The hound has never—" "I know," I said. "Your duty officer told me." He didn't say anything for a while after that. They opened a new entry in the station's security manifest that afternoon. I know because Orvith soon sent me the notification, which he seemed to find both professionally uncomfortable and personally necessary. The entry read, Earth domestic canid, herding subspecies, classification pending. The pending status, he explained, was because the biological consultancy had recommended a new assessment category rather than assigning her to an existing tier. The new category was called Apex Companion, registered, and she was the first entry in it. I told him she'd be back in 2 weeks, on the return leg of the maintenance circuit. He said he would note that in the record. I found Pip in the service bay at 1700, still on the warm deck plating, still beside the threat hound. They weren't touching. They weren't interacting. They were just 2 animals occupying the same space, the way 2 things that understand each other sometimes do. I put my hand on her head. She leaned into it. "Come on," I said. "Time to go." She stood, shook herself once from nose to tail, and walked out of the bay without looking back. The threat hound watched her go, then it stood, reset its crest to full carry posture, and went back on duty. Keth Druin filed the incident under a category he had invented himself, and which I only saw once in the formal documentation. He called it, resolved, no further action required. He was right. It wasn't.